In 2018, my boyfriend and I, now husband, were really getting into the financial independence, retire early movement. So we were getting together pretty frequently to basically look at our expenses and figure out where we could cut down. So some of this stuff was pretty obvious for both of us. It would be things like dining out or travel or shopping. But I noticed something different about our budgets, that mine had this litany of costs that his didn't. Enter the Hot Girl Hamster Wheel. And before we continue, this episode is sponsored by Betterment, but more on that later. So for the uninitiated, the Hot Girl Hamster Wheel is what I call the expensive maintenance practices that traditional feminine beauty ideals prescribe. And even though I knew it was really important that I took a microscope to every single recurring expense in my life at that time, I felt a lot of reluctance with these particular expenses because they were so intimately tied to my self-worth. But still, it wasn't lost on me that these were inclusions that I had that he didn't. And it wasn't until I dove into my Discover statements that I calculated I was spending on average about $3,800 per year. It was like $320 per month on my hot girl disguise. I was spending almost as much on my hot girl disguise as my car. And it turns out that this is actually freakishly in line with what the average woman spends on beauty every year, clocking in at around $3,756. This is roughly 22% higher than what the average man spends, but even that still felt kind of high to me. Now, whether or not that's a lot for you will depend on how much money you make. But for me, I literally could not afford to keep up appearances anymore if I wanted to hit my financial goals. At the time, $320 per month was about 10% of my take-home pay. But I didn't really know what to do next with this realization because basically none of the personal finance pros, or I guess I should say bros, because most of them were men, were really talking about this at all. Despite the fact that it made up a giant portion of my own spending, it was basically absent from the personal finance information that I was taking in at the time, which is a problem, considering the opportunity cost of these decisions cost the average woman about $1 million over the course of her life. Did I really want to retire with $1 million less just to look marginally more attractive along the way? Because as much as I loved having fresh manicures, I knew that any wage or wealth gap that I was experiencing was only being exacerbated by the fact that I was choosing to spend $1 in every $10 I took home on how I looked. We talk a lot about the way beauty ideals make women feel, and we've made a lot of progress with acknowledging that this industry has damaging psychological repercussions for girls and women. But we don't often acknowledge the economic side of the coin or the fact that it's just very expensive to maintain these beauty standards. So without further ado, here's my hot girl spending detox. This is what I created to figure out what was worth it and what wasn't. First, I sat down and I listed every single expense I could think of that pertained to my appearance. Some of it was kind of obvious, things like face wash, while others felt a little more extreme. So I wasn't getting Botox or injectables at the time, but that's a good example of something that you might find on a list like this, as 90% of Botox users are women and the average cost per session is between $300 and $500. For me, this included things like my hair cut and color, the makeup I was buying every few months, eyelashes, tans, manicures, pedicures, you name it. Then I listed the frequency of these expenses. How often was I doing it? What was the all-in cost after things like tip or travel? Time is money, right? So I wanted to understand the frequency with which these things were needing to be baked into my budget and calendar. If something was especially time-consuming, like eyelash extensions, which took about an hour every 2 weeks, I noted that too. Now, here's the part that's going to make you curse my name and unsubscribe from this channel, but please don't. You want to annualize the costs. Now, don't skip this step because something that happens once or twice a year is probably going to be less problematic for you budget-wise than something that you're having to do every 2 to 3 weeks, simply because the amount of times you're doing it means it's probably costing a lot of money and energy. You want to add up what a full year of each of these things is costing you. Then I basically took all of these costs and I contextualized them with respect to what I was earning and how much I was spending on other major areas of my budget. Now, you can use your gross salary if that's easier, but you want to divide your your all-in costs by your salary and just see what percentage of your income is going toward these things. I don't think there's any hard or fast rules for what's acceptable or not acceptable here, but when you see it compared to your other large expenses, you might be able to gauge whether or not it's reasonable. Now, I think it's important to say this is not intended to be a moral judgment of these choices. In fact, I was sitting in a pedicure chair a few weeks ago and someone leaned over and said, "Are you Money with Katie?" And I said, "Please don't tell everybody I'm here." But the point is, it's just a framework that should help you decide what's worth it for you and what's not. So, assuming you've decided to continue with the exercise, rank the beauty expenses from most important to least important to you. So for me, the top of the list was blonde hair, and pretty much everything else fell below that, and tended to feel less important to me than retiring with an extra $1 million. Then, starting from the bottom of the list and working your way up, you're basically going to start paring things down and taking things off the schedule. You're going to be cutting them out of your financial obligations. Now, you're really just testing the waters, right? It doesn't have to be forever, but as you experiment, you may find that your initial prioritization was wrong. Maybe you cut something that actually is important to you, or maybe you kept something that you're realizing really isn't. You also might decide it's not so much of a yes-no binary, and you might have other levers to pull, like doing something less frequently or finding a lower cost option. Now, I decided to try ditching all of it to basically go cold turkey. The spray tans, the nails, the hair, the lashes, the waxes. I left no pumice stone unturned. I simplified my makeup and my skincare routines so that I was using fewer products and less expensive products. And I found that the only thing I really missed was the hair, so that got added back in. And then something kind of weird and unexpected happened. I actually felt freer. My calendar no longer had to fit this onslaught of appointments. I wasn't shoehorning gel nail polish changes into the corners of my week. I wasn't trying to fit eyelash fills in after work. And I got a lot of time and mental energy back, which I really wasn't expecting because this was just supposed to be about money in the beginning. And fortunately, I didn't really notice a meaningful change in my confidence after that initial shock to the system, though I did kind of feel like I looked like Rufus the Naked Mole Rat for a few weeks without the lashes and the tan, but I got over it. Plus, to speak candidly, I was able to invest way more money, which meant while everyone else was living their hot girl summer, I was living my rich girl summer. The bottom line is I really had to sit back and interrogate which of these practices I was upholding because I felt this implicit pressure to do so, and which were actually important to me. And once I did, I knew I could spend the money guilt-free on the stuff that stuck around. Before you go, I just want to shout out Betterment. At Team Money with Katie, we're big fans of investing in a broad collection of stocks and bonds to keep your portfolio diversified. And Betterment makes it easy to be invested with its automated technology, recurring deposits, and tax-smart tools. With Betterment, you can also go beyond your 401k with a Betterment IRA, or use their major purchase investing goal within a taxable brokerage account if there's a big ticket item you're eyeing. Betterment's portfolios are built by the pros and designed with market volatility in mind, so you can stick to your investing plan no matter what's happening out there. Start investing today, let the markets do their thing, and you do yours. To get started, go to betterment.com/moneywithkatie. That's betterment.com/moneywithkatie. Investing involves risk, performance not guaranteed. That's all for this week here on YouTube, but if you want to hear the full conversation, the full deep dive into the hot girl hamster wheel, the beauty industry, and a really thought-provoking conversation with beauty culture critic and journalist Jessica Tofino, we're going to link the full podcast episode in the description of this video so you can check it out. And if you like these videos, go ahead and give it a thumbs up.